of organizations, and this requires me to do two things. The first is a declaration of interest. So I perform animal experiments. Also, I teach others how to perform animal experiments, and sometimes I am paid money to do so. So my livelihood depends to some extent on publishing scientific papers, often based on animal experiments. I sit on an animal welfare body, so if you hear me talking about the advantages, the merits of the animal welfare bodies, do bear in mind that I sit on one, and I, as Lush pointed out, I coordinate an informal network of animal welfare bodies, the Rede Europeia. I am also on the board of the Portuguese Laboratory Animal Science Association, so one would not expect me to be very critical of animal use if I belong to this organization, of course. So I may be extremely biased, as far as you know. And I'm also on the board of Animal Research Tomorrow, which is an international organization aimed at campaigning for animal research, albeit for humane and transparent animal research. So you might imagine that whatever I say today will be highly influenced by these potential conflicts of interest. Also a disclaimer that these are my personal views and opinions, and they do not necessarily reflect those of my employers or the organizations to which I am associated with. I hope my values, principles, and opinions, at least some of them, are shared with the people I work with, but ultimately these will be my personal views and opinions. So the thesis I will defend, there will not be 95 theses as ones nailed to a door by Martin Luther, though I do sometimes want to nail them to every single door of an animal facility. And the thesis I will defend is that a culture of care is for animal welfare, but also it's for human welfare, it's for sound research, and is also a culture of transparency. So, ergo, a culture of care will be the win-win-win scenario for animal research. So that's my main thesis. So let's go back a bit. In my view, the culture of care, the cornerstone of the culture of care, actually begins with the work by Bill Russell and Rex Birch when they first proposed the 3 R's and the humanity criterion. So in their principles of humane experimental technique, they stated that if we are to use a criterion for choosing experiments to perform, the criterion of humanity is the best we could possibly invent. So I very much strongly believe that this is the cornerstone of what we today deem a culture of care. I think it's important to highlight that both Russell and Birch were scientists. They were not animal activists, and they did at some point worked with animal models in their research. Also, it's very important to highlight that these 3 R's and the humanity criterion were originally proposed at a time where opposition to animal use was at an all-time low. So this was the 50s. We now had vaccines and antibiotics and antitoxins and insulin, and the number of therapeutics that previously were not available. We had moved to using large animals for which people cared deeply about, so companion animals and farm animals, to using mice and rats, for which most people in society, at least at that time, couldn't care less. So there was a very obvious benefit from animal research and very little public opposition to animal research. And still, scientists, not activists, not philosophers, not campaigners, scientists, our community proposed the 3 Rs that are the overarching principles of today's legislation protecting animals for scientific use, who proposed the 3 Rs and the humanity criteria. But this begs the question, can we conciliate animal experimentation with the core values of humanity, compassion, and kindness, which I like to think are shared values across humanity? Many will say that we cannot. Some of them are in the Portuguese Parliament. So you will see often campaigns by people, some have elected, who will say that in Portugal, animal research is equivalent to torture, and they go on to say that torture, dismemberment, slow death, and painful of thousands of dogs, rats, and monkeys every year, and the public is not even aware of it. This is from a political party in Portugal, where no human primates are used for scientific purposes other than observational studies in either in the wild outside or in zoos here within Portugal. And no dogs are used for scientific purposes, though they are used for educational purposes in veterinary schools, as one would expect. But what do we say? Well, of course, if you go to websites that defend animal research, you'll see some sentences in support of animal research, some of them a bit cliche, like good science and good animal welfare go hand in hand. In the Basel Declaration for Transparency in Animal Research, one of the items is that we shall respect and protect the animals entrusted to us and not inflict unnecessary pain, suffering, or harm to them by adhering to higher standards of experimental design and animal care. And in speaking of research websites, it's focused that minimizing suffering is the responsibility of all those involved in the use of animals in research, including the research institutions and the people that carry out the studies. So the debate, unfortunately, can often boil down to we said, they said. And this again begs the question, why should the public take our word for it, but not the word of animal activists, the ones that say that we are dismembering animals and causing their slow death and very painful death? We have to bear in mind that we work under a social license. Even though we have a license by the competent authority, a personal license by the competent authority, the establishments where we work are also licensed, and the projects within which we work with animal experiments are also licensed. Almost as important as these licenses is the social license, which is not explicit but tacitly granted by society, but warrants public trust. This trust should not be taken for granted. Trust is earned. So the public must rest assured that our work is relevant, competent, and humane. And also we ourselves must rest assured that our work and everyone else's is relevant, competent, and humane. So are you reassured that every single one of your colleagues, or at least the vast majority of your colleagues, is working in a relevant, competent, and humane way? If not, how so? And what can we do about it? I often say that there is an elephant in the room, in this case, the animal room, which is that the goal of providing best care for laboratory animals will, in some cases, conflict with their very nature and purpose, which is to model disease. So this will impose limitations to our ability to avoid pain and suffering in some cases. There may also be technical, logistical, and financial constraints imposing limits on what we can do to alleviate suffering, improve well-being, and meet the biological needs of animals. And the largest elephant of them all, which is that divergences may arise between scientists, animal welfare officers, veterinarians, animal caretakers, which at the animal welfare body, resulting from different backgrounds, professional objectives, and even deontological duties. Establishing a culture of care, at least in my view, will allow addressing these challenges in a meaningful way. How? In a minute. Firstly, it's important to bear in mind that a culture of care means going beyond legislation. So laws and regulations are essential, but they are not sufficient. Also, permanent oversight of researchers is neither possible nor desirable. We do not want a policeman in each facility. We do not want that, for instance, in there was this thing that was after a Congress promoted by the Society for Humane Education, something like that, the SPED. There was this declaration of Lisbon where they urged, and there were some scientists there, and they urged, among other things, there was external oversight of animal use, so internal and external oversight of animal use, and by whom? By animal protection agencies, the same that think that we are dismembering animals and torturing them and whatnot. And they propose also that animals should be filmed at all time. We went to the point of asking them how they they expected us to do that, and we got answers like, and this is actually in a minute of the Portuguese Parliament, some that one of the petitioners, because this declaration of Lisbon led to a petition, actually said, well, researchers could use like a helmet with a GoPro camera, and they could film the animals, and then we could watch the film and actually police whether they were doing things in the best possible way. Well, beyond being absolutely impossible to do this in any way, I think the best thing is to promote a culture of care where we have a self-regulatory mechanism to promote best principles and practice that works also within the external regulatory mechanism that is established by laws and regulations and proper supervision by competent authorities. So we have, beyond external regulation, there are a number of mechanisms that are included within internal regulation. So this diagram is with thanks to Anna also, who first brought my attention to this. So we have external regulation and internal regulation. Of course, within the scientific community, we have peer review, we have editorial policies of journals on animal welfare, we have community guidelines on how to take care of animals. Also, funding policies increasingly are demanding that animal welfare standards are duly explained, and of course of the highest standard possible. The best internal regulation that there is of individual scientists in our own choice of species and method. And then we have mechanisms that are imposed by external regulation, but actually are mediated by scientists. And these include project evaluation, the training of researchers. It's not the competent authority who trains researchers, but actually other researchers and animal caretakers and technicians. The animal welfare bodies, which is a legal demand, but mostly comprised of people within the institutions, and also the National Committee for the Protection of Animals, which is legally imposed and is or should have some level of oversight and assist animal welfare bodies in doing their work. So all of these processes are highly influenced by a culture of care. So establishing a culture of care within institutions will promote these internal regulatory mechanisms that, in my view, are more effective in delivering the best possible care to animals and promote the best principles and practice. A culture of care means a paradigm shift from mere compliance then with laws and regulations to a self-regulatory environment and proactivity to the 3 R's. So moving from this idea of the researcher, as we have here, that they are complaining that they find it harder and harder to get any work done with all the ethicists hanging around, to a self-reflective scientist that reflects on ethics, on animals, on welfare, on regulations, on 3 R's, and continuously is challenging his or her principles and practice. Because the ethical and social acceptability of animal use will depend on scientists' commitment that animal research is justified, non-wasteful, and humane. In a way, this reflects the 3 R's. So only if it's justified, so when we exhaust all replacement options, non-wasteful in the sense that we will use the minimum number of animals necessary to obtain high quality results, but not more than that. And humane research will demand the full implementation of refinement measures. This involves considering the 3 R's at all stages, from planning to execution to posterior revision of what went well and what went wrong. And this is a part of the culture of care. So it is a responsibility that is shared between regulators, institutions, and animal facility staff, though the researchers are ultimately responsible for their choice in models, methods, and practices. So this demands of researchers to play a part in the culture of care, to reflect about their work from a scientific point of view, but also ethically. Do they? Well, I asked them. So in a survey I carried out with researchers from different European countries, including Portugal, I asked how often researchers actually had ethical doubts or concerns regarding animal use in their own work. So this was during animal research courses, so laboratory animal science courses that every researcher has to attend in order to obtain a license to work with animals. So we did tests before the laboratory animal science course, after the laboratory animal science course. We did see some changes after the course on some of the things, not here, but at most researchers, at least occasionally, had ethical doubts or concerns regarding animal use in their own work. And this is a positive thing in my view. Some of them went on to say that they frequently had ethical doubts or concerns regarding animal use in their work. And roughly 30% would say that they never had any doubts regarding their animal use. But even within those, and you can see that these bars are broken down into different colors, and you can see the legend to these colors below. Even those who never had any, or at least did not report any ethical doubts or concerns regarding their work, would at least occasionally discuss ethical aspects of their work with animals with colleagues, aside from those that are elicited by regulatory demands, such as project evaluation and whatnot. So there is an environment of ethical reflection even within the scientific community. So what is this culture of care? This comes from the guidance document for animal welfare bodies and national committees by an expert working group, and that was sanctioned by the European Commission, and that can be found in the European Commission's website. So it is appropriate behavior and attitude towards animal research from all key personnel, there is an expectation of high standards with respect to legal, welfare, free hours, and ethical experts of animal research, operated and endorsed at all levels. And this means, at all levels means from the management to the people working with animals, and also involving not only just scientists, but also veterinarians, technicians, animal care staff, and everyone involved. It involves shared responsibility, which is without loss of individual responsibility, which meaning that though there is accountability if something goes wrong, when something goes wrong, there has to be the realization that it was not just that person who did something wrong, or just that situation that led to a problem, that everyone failed in some way when there is any problem. It is about the empowerment of the animal care staff and veterinarians, and this is why having management of establishments involved in the culture of care is so important. It is highly focused on effective communication between staff, researchers, and administrators. It involves continuing education and training, so continuing professional development. Also openness to suggestions and criticism from all personnel at all levels, again, from management to the people working with animals, and the recognition and reinforcement of positive attitudes and actions, encouraging and rewarding workers for personal initiative and willingness to establish a culture of care. So who is responsible for a culture of care? Well, everyone is. The competent authority is the animal welfare body, is the National Committee for the Protection of Animal Use for Scientific Purposes, institutions, organizations, animal caretakers, veterinarians, every single person, stakeholder, and institution. We could actually also include the public if they are, if we have a participatory model of research where the public is asked to contribute with their opinion and views on why, how animals should be used in research, which I think is where we are heading towards. And personal opinion here, though it must involve all personnel, there's an L missing there. At all levels, animal welfare bodies have a central role in promoting and maintaining a culture of care. And this is why I had a declaration of interest at first, because I sit at an animal welfare body. But the European Commission tends to agree with me, because it's stated in this guidance document that the animal welfare body is in an ideal position to drive the culture of care and should demonstrate effective leadership in this area. So it relies on the animal welfare body to push forward a culture of care. So the animal welfare body should ensure there are appropriate structures in place to promote a suitable culture of care, and that these are kept under review to ensure the outcomes are delivered effectively. This is a direct quote from the guidance document, that all relevant staff should be aware of the role of the animal welfare body and be encouraged to contribute ideas and initiatives to further develop good practices. And the animal welfare body should deliver a collaborative, collegiate, and non-confrontational, I would add whenever possible, approach whilst maintaining authority and achieving implementation of advice. Again, direct quotes from the guidance document from the European Commission. So where we also found that the animal welfare body should also encourage scientists to work and value the contribution of animal care staff, provide information on the role and functions of the animal welfare body for new staff, and encourage their contributions, provide for ongoing involvement of project holders in the animal welfare body, provide opportunity and encouragement for any staff member to raise issues with and to attend animal welfare meetings. So there's a participatory model here that includes researchers in the animal welfare body, and also any staff member who wishes to raise issues or give suggestions or share any thought, idea that this person may have with the animal welfare body. So again, communicate with all staff and spread the word about the 3 Rs, welfare improvements, policy changes, roles of care staff, training persons and veterinarians, and the animal welfare itself. So here we can realize that the European Commission does not expect the function of the animal welfare bodies to be static in terms of just following the law and making sure that people are complying with regulation, but actually challenging the microculture within each institution to go beyond legislation, to adapt new findings in animal welfare, especially in the 3 Rs, and to implement these changes based on the available evidence. The European Commission also sees a role for the National Committee for establishing a culture of care, and namely the organization of a national forum to allow sharing of good practice, ensuring sharing of good practices through establishment of national framework to collect, store, and disseminate information, promoting importance and relevance of a good culture of care, making animal welfare bodies aware of and supporting their role as the promoter of a good culture of care, and utilizing benefits of personal contacts and interactions in contrast to impersonal newsletters to emphasize the importance of good culture of care. Problem: where is this national committee that I have been hearing so much about? But never fear, the Portuguese Animal Welfare Body Network has it covered. So the Rede Europeia, which is an informal, so it is not mandated by legislation, by the competent authority, but the animal welfare bodies, by their own initiative, gathered and established as an informal network that organizes annual symposia, hold training workshops, exchange information and experiences, and on their website even have information for the public on communication and transparency. So if people put write on Google experimentação animal em Portugal, for instance, animal research in Portugal, one of the first hits will be the website of Rede Europeia, where they will find articles in the press and short videos and news pieces on the use of animals for scientific purposes, and also on the role of animal welfare bodies in institutions. So people know that there is a number of people dedicated to the care of the animals used for scientific purposes. So that being said, I would be preaching to the choir if I were to say here that the culture of care will improve animal welfare and the scientific outcome. Firstly, because stress and distress can affect the phenotype of animal models of disease. Of course, we all know that it has a particular impact on the immune system, with consequences for studies on allergies, infection, vaccination, inflammation, even autoimmune diseases. Of course, stress will impact also behavioral studies in the neurosciences, as one would expect. And the problem is, stress may either have a detrimental or protective effect. For instance, in autoimmune diseases, it might have a protective effect, and this will depend on the animal model, the type, intensity, and duration, the gender and age of the animal. So its effect is highly unpredictable, and especially the effect of distress makes it the more important to prevent animals from becoming distressed. So there is a very good justification, if we didn't have any other, to raise animal care standards and minimize animal stress as much as, and distress especially, as much as possible, not only for animals themselves, but also to improve the scientific outcome. So I will focus here on a specific case study, which is the refinement of mouse handling by tunnel or hand cupping. Why? Because in recent years, the evidence has been piling up that not only it is much better for animals, and I have like a short video here to show you the difference between the regular method for picking up animals, which most of you probably know that is tail picking. And we all know that they do not like it. They try to run away. You have to chase them around. And we have, as an alternative, we have tunnel handling. So tunnel handling and or handcuffing, which is harder to standardize, but it will, at least in theory, will have an even lower impact on animals, will have an improved outcome in terms of animal welfare. But as you can see in the references, and there are more references on this, I'm actually also working on this very topic, has a positive impact and on the scientific outcome. So you can see that it's far easier to get the animals to go into the tunnel. Of course, we do not give them a choice of whether to go into the tunnel or not, but they do have a choice of when to enter the tunnel. And of course, we can actually condition the animals to just come to our hands rather than picking them by the tail. So a few days of gentle handling prior to experiments can go a very long way. And you can see that the animals are not running away as when I was trying to pick them up by the tail. Here you go. Oh. I'm just showing off. The mouse whisperer. So why this case study? Because, well, it's a representative of less noxious techniques for mice, so that there's improved animal welfare. So it might lead to less biting, so it's better for scientists and caretakers. It improves, and there's evidence that improves the scientific outcome in several cases. And of course, it will improve the public perception of animal care, again, if we go and communicate with the public that we are now working on applying a refined way of picking up animals. It's much nicer for the public to see that we are either picking animals by the cup of our hands or using a tunnel than just lifting them by the tail. Because, of course, if you're minimally empathetic, you'll realize that you wouldn't want to be picked in that way. So it's a win-win-win. Did I say enough? It's win-win-win-win situation. Oh, and there's another win. For instance, here is an example from the I3S. We used our shift to tunnel handling to acknowledge the indispensable role of the animal care staff, because it's the animal care staff that will be implementing this change within our facility. So, and I wanted to highlight the acknowledgement of the animal care staff because it is of the utmost importance. It's only fair, of course, but also because there might be mental health risks for animal caretakers. So this is a really recent news piece from this month from Vice that picks up this paper published last year and mentions a few others on a cross-sectional study of professional quality of life, including compassion fatigue in laboratory animal personnel. So compassion fatigue happens when, due to this dissonance between the obligation of and duty of the animal care staff to, well, care for animals as it's in the name itself, and the fact that they have to euthanize animals, the fact that they may see the animals in severe conditions where they can't intervene, and some level of helplessness and impotence because they are not heard enough and their views and suggestions are not taken into consideration. And this is embedded in the concept of one welfare that connects animal welfare, human well-being, and environmental conservation. The concept of one welfare borrows from the concept of one health that connects animal welfare and human welfare. And one welfare proposes that if humans do better, the animals with which they establish relationships will do better as well. So animal abuse situations are often connected with poverty, with disenfranchisement, with a number of socio-economical issues, poor chances in life, and improving either animal welfare and working with these people or the lives of these people will have a beneficial impact on the overall welfare of both humans and animals alike. So the problem of compassion fatigue is directly connected with this. From this paper I just mentioned, Lafollette et al., half of researchers never or only sometimes would talk about their work with other people. So there's some level of isolation. But only a small percentage reported severe stress and pain in their animals. Euthanasia was performed frequently by the animal care staff. So this is at least in theory, was one of the main reasons proposed to cause the compassion fatigue, but sometimes without the ability to decide, and may include inherent physical method. The method itself did have, but there was only anecdotal evidence on the impact of euthanasia on the animal care staff, but especially the ability to decide on the method, on when to perform the euthanasia. Let's say you're having a bad week and you would opt for that in that week because you're having a bad week for some reason, not to euthanize animals because in some way it will affect you even more. And in many times, in 20% of the cases, never the animal caretakers never had the chance to say, well, can someone else do it? This week is not, or today is not a good day for me. Can I do it tomorrow? Something like that. The personnel generally interacted closely with their laboratory animals, regardless of them being dogs, monkeys, or mice and rats. And in fact, 40% agree that they often named their animals. The enrichment provision varied. Usually personnel had some control, but many wished they could give more to their animals. The conclusion was that the higher compassion fatigue was associated with less social support, with more stress, pain in their animals, less or no choice in deciding whether they would be the ones to euthanize their animals, and people with higher compassion fatigue indicated a greater desire to provide animals with more enrichment than they currently could. On the other hand, people reporting higher compassion satisfaction had more social support, less stress or pain in their animals, and performed certain relationship promoting human-animal interactions. So it seems to be a no-brainer. So if you allow the animal care staff to actually have a voice, to promote improved animal welfare in the facilities, then the human welfare of these people will also improve. Because, and especially considering it was not the euthanasia frequency, it was not the type of research that had any impact on the compassion fatigue, nor the species. So there was the idea that people would tend to have more compassion fatigue if working with non-animal primates, for instance, than in working with animals. But it was actually the disenfranchisement, the having no voice, having no say, having no actual power of influencing principles and practice that was the highest contributor to compassion fatigue, so the burnout and secondary traumatic stress. So this culture of care seems to be a very good idea. Where do I buy one? Well, you have to do it yourself. I propose 3 steps. The first is do go to the Nordic Opal website. They have ample resources on a culture of care. And the first step would be improving communication by regular meetings, holding special events like having a researcher talking about their science and then the animal technologist talking about the techniques and the animal care within the project. So that is a dual talk. Informal meetings for all in which anyone can raise welfare issues. So having all stakeholders, all personnel from all levels, including the people in the ivory tower, the management. So make sure that each study had a pre-start and a workshop meeting involving, again, everyone. The 3 R's improvements are being reported to the animal welfare body and shared at external user meetings. They also propose this. This comes from the culture of care network, other ideas, boxless events. So anyone that can submit out of the box ideas to improve practice or map the zeitgeist, the general feeling of your animal facility staff via survey. Also, why not survey researchers as well? So improve communication, know what's happening, and listen to people. So value the animals and value the people, giving voice to animal caretakers and technicians, rewarding innovation and initiative. So culture of care is as much rewarding innovation in an initiative, good practice, as it is preventing bad practice. This means also empowering the care staff and the veterinarians. Again, we need management to be on board. If the management is not on board, there is no way a culture of care can be duly implemented. Establish a culture of shared responsibility. Again, if something wrong happens, it's not everyone's fault, but it's everyone's responsibility to make sure it does not happen again. People tend to sometimes mix the fault of something with responsibility to deal with something, but sometimes things are not your fault, but it's your responsibility to deal with them, even if it's not your fault. The same here. Again, effective communication between staff, researchers, administrators at all levels, and, as one would expect, continuing education and training. So constantly improving principles and practice. So this would be step 2 in my view. And establishing a culture of challenge. This I borrowed from Susanna Lohimis from the European Commission, and I'm very fond of this view of culture of care as a culture of challenge, of constantly seeking new opportunities for the 3 R's. For instance, here in the example I gave on tunnel handling, especially refinement. For every animal model, for every protocol, in any situation. These are just a few examples. So establishing earlier humane endpoints are also scientifically sound. Refined substance administration or sample collection. If you see something in the literature, why not try it in your animal facility? Improved palliative care and challenging the excuses that refinement interferes with results, that it hinders reproducibility. Says who? That, oh, and these are the worst. Oh, we have always done it this way. And we use refinement as often as possible. What does this mean? Are you? Do not tell me, show me. This is what a culture of challenge is. And a culture of care is or should be a culture of challenge, making sure that all personnel at all levels understands that good welfare, good management, good planning, good communication are prerequisites for good science. Thank you for listening, and I am open to your questions.
Thank you very much, Nuno. It was really interesting.